at first it's so like you feel so sensitive to every single viewer, but honestly, okay, here's the tea, you guys. I was thinking about this the other day. The best thing I ever did was stop looking at my viewership during the stream. I told myself, I was like, no, I'm not freaking out over this. Like, I'm reasonable. I'm not working myself up over nothing. You know what I mean? Like, I can look at the stream count and it'll help me gauge like how I'm doing in the moment. Like, but it doesn't. All it did was make me less consistently funny. So now I only look at the average viewers after. Also, here's another thing that I did. When you're first starting out, it feels like you're streaming into a total void. I kind of shifted my perspective a little bit. Instead of getting stressed out about how I'm gonna talk when nobody is responding in chat, I'm just gonna think about it like all of my best regulars are lurking and I have to talk to them as though they're like the quiet friend who's visiting me. You know what I mean? So I just imagine delusionally to myself that there's a lot of people lurking every time and that they're all very interested in everything I have to say. I am that quiet friend. It's tough because when you're streaming, you have to remember that like when you're with your homies, you and your homies are kind of hanging out together. And so the burden is on all of you as a group to like to power the conversation as though the interaction is a car. And you guys are all together fueling it as a group, right? And so you're all pushing to keep the car moving so that you guys can all have a good time together, right? But when you're streaming, people are at the stream relying on you to be the full power of the conversation. So there's no one to help you push it, right? It's hard, but you have to remember that like you're the person who is pushing the whole conversation forward. And so you have to take on the burden of making it work by yourself. If every single person in the stream was lurking, if it was only lurkers, if you have 200 viewers and all of them were just lurking, they're all looking towards you to be the person who is making the whole interaction move, right? Just like if you were with your homies, right? If you were with your homies and everybody was quiet except for you, if you and like 23 friends all went out together and everyone was silent except for you, it would be really tough, right? Like you wouldn't have fun because you'd be like, why do I have to start every conversation? Why do I have to like make every joke? It's like a little bit tiring, right? But when you're streaming, that's what you're there for, kind of. I understand, but I don't understand how. Yeah, I think that's like valid. It is tough, right? What I will say is like, you can think about it like this. Like if you're hosting a party, what would you do? You might organize a game, right? And then you might talk about that. So like when you're playing video games, it might be good to have video games that you can like specifically talk about and just like narrate what you're doing in the video game. That's one thing. You can just tell stories. You can tell stories about yourself or about your life or about like what happened to you yesterday or this morning, or, you know, talk about what you're eating or anything, right? Like sharing a little bit of personal stuff about yourself. Obviously you don't want to be too detailed or revealing, but you can talk a little bit about, oh, you know, I really like to cook and here's the types of stuff I like to cook. You know what I mean? And then I would say also like having specific bits, like trying to inject a little bit of comedy and sort of setting up some bits that are funny on purpose, right? And like for me, I think I do better with improv. So like I'll take something that's already happening and just exaggerate it, you know, and that's how I find comedy. But there's other ways to do it, right? You could prepare jokes a little bit and like, you know, do the sort of stand-up comedian route of like telling stories that are a little bit more scripted, but, you know, that are orchestrated to be funny and to set up jokes, you know? Okay, so when you're small, there's like this temptation to like imagine, like, what if I got a huge raid? Wouldn't that make things so much easier? I shouldn't say fix, that's not quite what I mean. What I mean is like, wouldn't it make it easier? Like imagine if Iron Mouse raided me tomorrow. oh my God, 5,000 people would show up maybe, right? And that would maybe be that moment. But the truth is really that blowing up overnight is a long process where you get good after a while. Yeah, so I just, all that to say that, like, just got to be patient with yourself. A big issue for me is that I lack stories still. Just got to say what's been happening in my life would kill the vibe, so I haven't been out much. I think you underestimate, like, so if yesterday, what did I actually do yesterday? Yesterday, literally, I got up, we went for fast food. So we went to like a vegan fast food place that is a little bit of a drive. And then we came home and I messed around with Minecraft. But like, that's not really a story. Do you know what I mean? Like, nothing happened yesterday. What I have to do is I have to take the fact that I didn't really do anything yesterday, and I have to transform it into a story, right? I have to find a story in there. You know, I have to find things that are in that experience that are worth talking about. And that takes like some effort, and it takes like some skill too. Like it's not something that you're necessarily just going to be able to do off the top of your head. Like, it might take a while, it might take some practice, but it's definitely possible to do. And people do it all the time, right? Like, comedians tell stories that would be boring without the flair and the jokes that they add. A comedian might tell a story about how he found out that there's a telescope that's looking through space, right? And there isn't even a personal story there, but he can transform it into something funny. So that's my advice on that, is like, the stuff that happens in your life is boring unless you can make it interesting. And you have to do that kind of by using it like a tool. Helps a lot. I'm glad. Yeah, I'm glad that's helpful. It's not intuitive, right? Like, because when streamers say you should tell stories, I think it's easy to imagine that they're just like really interesting people with interesting things to say, and oh my goodness, they must have so much going on. But really, they don't necessarily, and neither do comedians or politicians or anybody, right? It's a lot funnier and a lot more interesting if your audience can relate. So it's important to spend some time thinking about who you want to be the person who's watching your stream, because if you don't know who that person is, you don't necessarily know how to talk to them, right? Like, if you're telling a story to a person who is like your mom, your actual mom, they might not relate to a story about sitting at home yesterday and playing video games literally all day to the point where you had to get up and like shake your ass out. You know what I mean? But you might be able to tell that story to like a 21-year-old dude, you know, and he might get that story. You see what I'm saying? So that's another part of it. It's like figuring out who can relate. Hi there, Robin. How are you?